ADA 30 Idaho. Interview Series, Senait Ricks, interviewed by Stephen Snow.
Hello everyone, and again I want to welcome you to our ADA 30 Idaho celebration. It's our interview series, and now I'm excited to have a wonderful guest who will be joining us today. Her name is Senait Ricks. Now Senait lives in Oakley, Idaho, and for those of you who don't know, Oakley is a very small town.
Yeah, very small.
In the southern, eastern, central part of the state. I'm excited you're joining us today. So far, we've done interviews with various people, but I really wanted to take the opportunity to delve deep into the minds of young people, specifically those who were born after the ADA, post-ADA era, and how really they've been impacted. For example, like young Senait Ricks here. So again, welcome Senait. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So for those viewers who don't know your backstory, why don't you go ahead and tell us more about yourself, Senait?
Sure. So I was actually born in Africa, in the country of Ethiopia. And when I was born completely deaf. And my older sister was also born completely deaf. I lived there for 5 years, and at that point, my birth parents decided that because we were deaf and because we couldn't communicate with them or with the world, that it would be best to give us up for adoption. So, at that point, we were moved into foster care, but I didn't know that I was being adopted. I was 5. I just knew that my birth mother was leaving. So, I was in foster care for a while, and after about 8 months, my parents here in America decided that they wanted to adopt, and they just had this feeling that they should adopt a deaf girl. So they were looking at pictures, and they saw the picture of me with my sister smiling, and their hearts melted. And they decided that they wanted to adopt us. They didn't realize at the time, though, that we were in Africa. So my parents, during that time, were college students, so it was a tough decision for them to make, but they decided to proceed with the adoption. So they got on a plane and flew to Africa to adopt my sister and I. And I remember when I met my parents, it was the first time I ever met a white person. I thought the whole world was black like me. So I remember meeting them and my mom saying, "Hi, I'm your mom." And I was like, I don't know what this means. So we moved to America, and I just remember thinking how clean everything was and just being amazed by the technology that was here. And it was a lot to take in. It was a lot of really strange food for a while, and it was an interesting experience. My parents at the time didn't know any sign language, so we just did the best we could to try to gesture. I remember my mom pointing at me, and I, of course, didn't know what that meant at the time. And my parents started looking to see where they could learn to communicate with us. They knew that they needed to learn sign language and not just try to communicate with us in spoken English. So they were able to find a deaf church, a deaf ward at the time, and my parents and my sister and I began learning sign language together. And during my childhood, we moved around quite a bit for my dad's job. So we moved to Utah, back to Texas, and moved several times, and we finally ended up in the small town of Oakley, Idaho. And that's where I've been now, and that's where I am as a senior.
Wow. Your experience and your life story is incredible and much different than many of ours. That's amazing. And African culture compared to here, there are some obvious stark differences.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, very different.
So, obviously this interview is about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
And really the ADA's goal is to make sure that the community, the world, well, really our country, is accessible for people with disabilities. So I'm wondering, with your experience being born in Africa, and if you remember, what access looked like there compared to what access looks like here for you, and how the ADA impacts people like you as a deaf person.
Well, you have to understand that in Africa and in Ethiopia, deaf people have nothing. They're not considered to be human beings. Society considers them to be handicapped and a problem that needs to be shunned and put away. I remember my sister and I would be out and about with our parents, and we would have people come up to us and speak, and when they realized that we were deaf, they would make a huge scene and they would harass us just because we were deaf. And I remember thinking that we were just little kids. Like, why in the world would people come up to us and harass and bully us? So Africa is not good for deaf people. I would recommend that they all move to America because really, we have so many rights here. You and I, as deaf people, we can go to the doctor and we can request interpreters. And even if they say that they don't provide interpreters, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act to protect us, to say that we do deserve access. So I feel like I'm protected here. In Ethiopia and in Africa, I didn't feel protected at all. I felt shunned by society. So it's a huge difference living in Africa and America. When I was in Africa, I didn't feel like a person. And coming to America, I realized how important the ADA is to me. I remember going to a place and being afraid to ask for an interpreter, and someone explained to me that because I had the ADA, that I could request an interpreter and they were required to provide one. So I remember going to that place and saying, well, we need a sign language interpreter, and they tried to refute that, and we said, well, no, the ADA says that you have to provide that. And they did. Here in America, I have communication, and I had no communication when I was in Africa. So the ADA has had a huge impact on my life.
Wow, so you really feel more valued here in the U.S., that you are treated as a human being that has equal rights to anyone else.
Right.
So you're currently a senior.
Yes.
And through your upbringing, your educational journey, how have you felt? And how did you get to be here? So what things have helped you along your journey? And what does it look like through school to get to where you are now?
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot to talk about. When I first moved to America, I didn't have any education, any language. I only had some gestures that my sister and I made up together. It's kind of like we made up our own language to understand each other. But I didn't know English. I didn't have a spoken language or anything like that. So when I came to America, I was placed in a public school with hearing students. My parents had looked for a deaf program, but there wasn't one around. So I remember going to school and understanding absolutely nothing. I mean, I thought it was fun to be there, but I didn't understand anything. It was then that my parents placed us in a deaf school, well, I should say a deaf program within a public school. And at the time, I thought my teacher was so strict, but I'm very grateful for them now. Because they were so strict, I was able to learn so much, and I was able to learn that I couldn't just be lazy to get by at school, that I actually had to try. At that time, my sister was starting 4th grade, and I was starting kindergarten. And it was very challenging because we were learning sign language and going to school at the same time. My dad's job moved us to Utah, so we moved there, and that was the first time I actually attended a school for the deaf. It was JMS. And that was a really interesting experience, being around deaf peers. It was so nice to be able to fully communicate with them. At that point, it was then decided that I should be in a public school again, so I was placed in a public school as the only deaf student. And that was 6th grade. And that was so challenging because my peers were all hearing students who had access to their education this whole time. So I wanted to be on their same level. And I wanted to show that I could be just as smart, that because I was deaf, my education wasn't any lower. So I worked really hard that year. And then we moved back to Texas for my dad's work. And the same thing happened in Texas, where I went from a deaf program to being the only deaf student in the entire school. So that was challenging, going from a program where I had my peers to again being the only deaf person, where people would talk around me and I had no idea what they were saying. And I would have an interpreter with me during the school day. I would explain to the students that I was deaf and couldn't understand what they were saying, and the interpreter would interpret for me, but sometimes that was frustrating because the students would say, "Oh, your interpreter's always with you. It's like your mom." And I was like, "No, my interpreter is not my mom. My interpreter is my voice. I am my own person. I don't need someone to be with me 24/7. So that was kind of frustrating, but I got used to it. And after that, we moved to Idaho, and that was in 10th grade. And the same situation happened in Oakley. I was the only deaf student in the entire school, so that was challenging. And for the first semester, I didn't even have a sign language interpreter. That was so hard. I didn't understand what was going on in class. People would talk around me and I had no idea what was going on. So I spent a lot of time working at home and teaching myself because I just didn't understand what the teacher was saying without an interpreter. So then they finally got an interpreter for me. And it just feels like I've been going through this process forever. And it was only 10th grade. I was so frustrated and so tired of not understanding things or having to depend on the interpreter to be there the whole time and people saying that they were my mom. So anyways, that was 10th and 11th grade. And now I'm finally a senior. So I'm so excited.
Wow. So your journey in experiencing those challenges, wow. You know, the U.S. is not perfect. We have our own struggles. But to think about you comparing your life back in Africa to now in the U.S., you have continued to persevere. And even though challenges have come up, it's made you stronger. And now you're finally a senior. So there are people such as myself that were born before the ADA. And we know what life was like before the ADA existed. So we have that comparison of before and after. So I'm always curious what young deaf people like yourself think about the ADA. What's your perspective of it?
My perspective is that the ADA is really great, but sometimes I feel like people my age don't know how to advocate for themselves because adults typically do it for them. I've noticed that adults in my life will advocate for me, but I never learned that way how to advocate for myself. Usually I'm in a situation where my mom is there, or there's an interpreter or a teacher who signs, or even a deaf adult who will say, "It's okay, Senait, I will advocate for you," but I don't learn anything that way. I wish adults would let us take charge and learn how to self-advocate and use the ADA. It's important that we know all the details of the ADA and not just what it is in general. I wish adults would step back and let us do it ourselves, because I feel like right now I have adults telling me, "Oh, you're young, you're deaf, it's okay, I'll do this for you." It's important that we remember that the ADA is for us, as deaf people, as people with disabilities. So we need to learn to advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. For example, us as Americans, we love our freedom. And that is because of the U.S. Constitution. But a lot of Americans haven't ever read the Constitution. They don't know the amendments. They don't know what it says. And I think that's important, that we should know what it says, because it directly applies to us as Americans. And then you can take that same concept and apply that with an individual with a disability, and they should know what the ADA says. Taking advantage of that and knowing what those rights are, like you said, it comes down to self-advocacy, to be able to look at the ADA and know the different issues. To be able to look at the ADA and know that there are different titles. One applies to employment, one applies to public accommodations. I think you're absolutely right that oftentimes adults will take care of things for youth, but it's important for you guys to step up and say, it's my responsibility, my duty to learn and know what to do. So I really hope that other young people follow your example. You know, delve deep into self-advocacy and understanding your rights in order to protect yourself.
Well, yeah, and
Looking at my other questions. Did you have another comment?
I was just going to say that deaf people should be independent. We can do everything that hearing people can. We just can't hear. That's the only difference. I know people try to do things for us, but we should do it ourselves. And I know that's hard, trust me, especially because we feel like we miss so much information when people talk around us. And sometimes it feels like it's in one ear and out the other. But it's important that we do things ourselves instead of just letting someone else do it for us.
So you're a senior. This is your final year.
Yes, finally.
What are your plans after graduation?
Yes, my plans after high school. So I plan to go to BYU, Idaho.
In Rexburg, right?
Yeah, that's in Rexburg, BYU, Idaho. So I plan to either become a psychologist for the deaf or a therapist because I want to be able to help deaf people. Right now, with the way it is, many deaf parents don't sign and they just don't know what to do. Well, no, sorry, I should go back and say parents who are hearing who have deaf children don't sign. So I would love to be able to help them, to teach them sign, and then also maybe help as a therapist with counseling. Right now, when deaf people go to counseling, they typically have a hearing counselor, and the counselor doesn't know exactly how they feel. If I were a counselor for the deaf, I would be able to relate to them and know exactly how they feel, and I'd be able to help them get through whatever they're going through. So, one way or another, I want to help deaf people, and I want to help the community. And so I want to do that by either becoming a psychologist or a counselor for the deaf.
Wow. And here in Idaho, we don't have a full-time counselor for the deaf, with the exception of a school counselor. But there's not a person who offers those types of services, those counseling and treatment services. So I think that's excellent for you to finish school and become a counselor or psychologist. That would be such a rich benefit for the deaf community, and it's so important to have that direct, accessible communication.
Right. A signing counselor would be so much better. Having an interpreter there, it just feels like they're in your business. It would be nice to get them out of there and just have direct communication.
Yeah, it feels like a third wheel.
Right. Yes.
So one last question. What are your feelings and identity regarding being a deaf person in America? Do you mind going into detail about your experiences and identity as a deaf person in America? Not just a deaf person, but a young deaf person.
Okay. So I have a lot of different feelings about that because I've moved around so much. It really has depended how people have treated me, and it's been different in Idaho, Texas, and Utah. In Idaho, especially where I live, there are not a lot of deaf people. So when we're out and about signing and people see us, it's like we're the newest attraction at the zoo. I'm like, okay, you really don't have to stare us down. In Texas, though, when we were out and about, people didn't mind because they saw people signing all the time. When I tell people that I am a deaf person, really in all places that I've lived, well, I should say that obviously sign language is interesting and people want to learn, so maybe that's why they stare at me sometimes. Most of the time, when I identify as deaf and tell people that I'm deaf, I feel like people look down on me. They say that because I'm deaf that I can't do anything, that I can't drive, that I can't read, and they make all these assumptions about me, which is so annoying. And I explain to them that I can drive and I can read, I have eyes, I just can't hear. So people, when they see me driving, they're like, wait, are you allowed to do this? Is this safe? You're deaf, how are you driving? And I'm like, okay, yes, deaf people can drive, we have eyes, we just can't hear. But we're able to drive just as safely as other people. So that happens all the time. And in Idaho, Texas, and Utah, people seem to freak out when I tell them that I drive. They're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Should I drive for you? And I'm like, no, I've got it. Like, this is going to be okay. When I identify as a deaf person, I feel like people look down on me. But I tell them, I can do this myself. And at first, people are like, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. And I love to be able to prove them wrong. That I just can't hear. There's nothing else that's wrong with me. I can still be independent. So my identity has really depended on where I've been. In Idaho, as a deaf person, I kind of feel like as a senior, people have pitied me. They think I need extra help and extra attention. And I'm like, no, that bothers me. I can do this myself. The only thing I need is access to communication. That's all I need to succeed. And yes, the interpreter is there, and sometimes people just try to talk to me and I'm like, hold on a second, let's get the interpreter in here. But they think the interpreter has to help me on things, and I'm like, no, I can do this myself. And as a deaf teenager, people assume that I'm just going to kind of go with the flow and not stand up for myself, and that is not me. I'm different. I am going to pay attention. I'm going to be involved. And of course, I still like to have fun. I'm a teenager. I like to joke around with my friends and socialize. I'm not boring by any means. So anyways, people have responded differently to my identity in Texas, Utah, and Idaho. It all depends on people's perspectives. Some people, when they find out I'm deaf, are really encouraging, and they come right up to me and talk to me. And other people won't even approach me. And I'm like, what's wrong? I'm not going to bite. I'm not going to hurt you. But it's like they're afraid to even talk to me because I'm deaf. So that happens sometimes.
Yeah. I often refer to being deaf as the invisible disability. Oftentimes when people meet me for the first time, it's like a deer in the headlights. Just this blank stare and shock. So that's not the reaction I often get. I assume it's the same for you.
Yeah.
That sometimes I'm like, oh, that's enough, people.
Well, but also...
Oh, go ahead.
But also at school, it's really hard for me right now in high school. Not so much in middle school, but right now in high school, I want to fit in, and I want to hang out with other students. But because there aren't any other deaf students, I have to be in groups with hearing students. That's really hard because they talk all the time, and I have no idea what's going on, so I just sit there quietly. I try to teach them some sign language, but they lose interest pretty quick. So that's hard because I feel alone even though I'm in the group, but thankfully I have friends in my books.
So how do you handle that?
Well, when I'm at school and everyone's talking around me, sometimes I'll say, hey, what did you just say? I'll ask them to repeat themselves, and sometimes they will. They'll say, oh, I just said this. But oftentimes they say, oh, I'll tell you later, but then later never happens. And sometimes it's pretty degrading. I feel frustrated because I can't understand what they're talking about, and I tell them even if they use a little bit of sign language, that would be good enough. So I'm excited and looking forward to getting done with this senior year so I can be out and free and be around more deaf people. So before it was just 2 years and now just 1 year left. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'm still friendly with people, and a lot of times my peers will say hello, but then they just go off and talk in their own little groups, and I just gotta keep doing what I'm doing. There are a couple that are really interested in learning sign language, and that's important. Even though it's 1 or 2, it's better than none. So a few of them have asked to learn sign language, and I'm happy that they're learning, and I'm happy to be able to teach them some sign, and they really are picking it up. And even if it's just one person that's willing to learn sign language, that's better than none. So I'm definitely willing to teach them.
Wow. I applaud you for your bravery and your consistent perseverance and tenacity through great times and challenging times. Talking about your experience in Africa all the way till now. Wow. And last question. The story you shared with us, where you talked about self-advocacy, how you can empower yourself and take control of your life to make those decisions and not let anyone take that away from you. So my question to you is, what kind of advice would you give to other deaf youth out there that may be struggling with some of those issues?
Okay. The advice I would give to them is listen to yourself. If people are telling you you can't do something, you don't have to accept that. You don't have to be rude about it, but you can politely say, no thanks, I don't need your help, I can do this. And challenge yourself. Be passionate about it. You only have one life to live, and you're the only one living it. So get out there and do those challenging things. Don't let other people do them for you. And you might fail. That's okay. We learn a lot from failure. You may be frustrated that you're failing and trying again and failing, and you might want to give up. But you shouldn't. You should keep going. I failed a lot of times in my life, and it's frustrating. Sometimes I feel like I won't ever succeed, but I just have to keep going, and I have to learn from those mistakes that I make along the way. So I would tell people just to keep going even if you fail. And especially if adults tell you you can't do something or you're not capable, you can. Tell them you can do it yourself, because you've got to live for you, and you can't have other people doing it for you. You're not a baby. So you're your own person, and you should do it yourself for yourself. So that's what I would tell people.
That is wonderful advice, and I really hope all the deaf youth out there are really paying close attention to your advice. I know it's hard. It is challenging to be young with COVID and all the other types of struggles, but you have set a great example of how to succeed and overcome those barriers. Of course, the ADA helps reduce those barriers, but there are still personal barriers there. And I just want to thank you again for your time for joining. It has been wonderful to chat with you. I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. It's your last year, senior year of high school, with your future college and career. I look forward to seeing you progress.
Yes, well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor to be your guest.
Absolutely. For all of the viewers out there, thank you so much. And I want to remind you to go ahead and share this interview. And remember not to forget, use our hashtag ADA30Idaho. Also, we will have more interviews in our interview series to come, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much and take care.
Thank you. A word collage in the shape of the United States with the word access highlighted and hashtag thanks to the ADA.